It's that time again, that time when we walk into the virtual bar and see who's hanging out in there today. Today, I'm joined by Greg Berry and Ken Billing as per our usual arrangement. How are we doing, gentlemen?
Wonderful. Excellent.
Wonderful. Yeah, right.
Wonderful.
How are you really doing, Greg? That's what I really want to know.
Well, my back was bothering me.
Yeah, blah, blah. I'm your host, Christopher Antone, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar Special Edition. Before we get too far into today and before we introduce our guest for today, I wanted to make a comment about some changes that are going to be coming down the pipeline for our podcast. If you listen to us on a regular basis, you know that we have two different types of podcasts that we do here, and we were having a little bit of trouble kind of separating them out and like having their own identity. And so our production team met, and so when we interview someone to talk about something specific, something that's relevant to that particular topic, that's going to be our special edition. And then our 3P weekly is going to start being called Three Pastors Walk Into our weekly edition, so that you can keep them kind of delineated a little bit easier in your own mind. But they'll all be posted to the same place on Spotify, Google, and Apple. Also on our website at ethelbaptistchurch.org. So make sure that you're going there and liking and subscribing and all the good stuff that goes along with that. Right, Ken?
That's right.
Well, Ken, why don't you introduce our guest today? Because I know that you have had some personal experience with UGM, and you're pretty excited about this interview.
Yeah, the key scripture for this morning, well, depending on when you hear it, is Mark 14:7, where Jesus said, "For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you will not always have a me." And today we have with us Phil Altmeyer, who's the Executive Director of Union Gospel Mission. And I personally want to extend an enormous thanks to Phil. And I cannot just express how much admiration I have for you. I moved our family from western Montana over into the Spokane area back in 1985. That was just about the time that you took over the reins, wasn't it?
Man, that was...
Gee.
And
that was
a long time ago.
That is close. It was, 86, 87. Yeah.
And UGM was doing great at that time. The little building down on Trent, this humble little building.
One-room schoolhouse with the hitching post out front and the wagons going by.
This is unbelievable that I'm sitting with a young guy that remembers the history.
I know, right?
He's younger than me, and he remembers the history. Yeah,
he remembers
down
most
on
things,
Spokane
actually.
Falls Boulevard.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I had that sign, that iconic sign out there with the leaning cross.
Yeah, we still have it.
And
we moved it.
That's a treasure.
Yeah.
But UGM was doing great back then. And, here we are 37 years down the road. And I've watched from, at different times, a distance and up close, what's happened at UGM. And I am just in awe of what you guys have accomplished, how you've stayed steady, how you've grown, prospered, blessed, and as far as I can tell, stayed out of controversy and scandal and swap-overs and changes and bankruptcies and everything that seems to happen.
That's a miracle in and of itself, that you can have an industry or you can have an organization that has been around that long and has not been inundated with scandal, because it just seems like there would be just people out there seeking to destroy it. And
we'll see if we
amazing.
can change that today, Phil.
Well, yeah.
Are we taking requests?
Yeah.
But it's amazing that and it's not just you, it's your entire family has been devoted to this, as near as I can tell. I went back to confirm some of my facts, and it looks like you had posted a new website, and some of that history I could not find again. But
okay.
In case you folks don't know, if you're looking for a ministry that is just par excellence in how they how they minister, and integrity and honesty, you cannot find any higher than UGM. And I'm sure they're probably a model across the nation for how to do missions right. So, my thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I think the hardest challenge is for missions to move in the direction of just becoming social agencies, and the gospel and being central to what we do is what often gets neglected. And I appreciate our board. I appreciate the fact that that's always been central, and we'll keep it there as long as I'm there. And that, I think, is why God has honored it. Your scripture was fascinating to me. Read that again.
That's Mark 14:7. And Jesus said, "For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you will not always have me."
Because what's interesting, when you do an Old Testament study on the poor, Christians back then truly understood the obligation of taking care of the poor.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you ever thought about Zacchaeus?
Yeah.
He just comes to know the Lord. What's his first response? Half of his possessions to the poor.
Giving everything
And
back.
that was historically. So when I've never really thought about that verse till you read it today.
Well, it was written into the law, like with field gleaning
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a lot of different other
Yeah.
things. There was a real interest and concern about the community at large taking care of the poor and the impoverished.
So why was there not only law written, but why did God say that he would take the life of those that did not care for the poor? I mean, it's the strictest judgment of all the law. And then furthermore, I've got 3 pastors. I'd love to ask this question. Where in the Old Testament do we see that God literally destroyed people because they didn't care for the poor?
Oh, that's a good question. Please elaborate.
Ezekiel tells us it was Sodom and Gomorrah. They were destroyed. We always think of their wickedness, but it was they had no concern for the poor. And then in Amos, which I know you read for your quiet time this morning.
Oh, yeah.
You guys
that's one of my favorite
were-
books is Amos.
You pulled up in there is an unbelievable description. And at the end of it, he talks about how they abuse the poor. And at the end of it, he says, you know what? I'm going to take you out and throw you on the garbage heap, and they'll be able to pick your body out in the size of fish hooks. I
Wow.
mean, it's a vivid picture. And
That's
so
That's
there-
specific, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
There is strong judgment, and so that's interesting. I'll have to go back to that verse. There's very little teaching in the New Testament because I believe they already knew it was part of their culture. I say this all the time. What do you guys do? The first thing you get in a car, you put on your seatbelt. Maybe not here in Idaho.
Well, some of us, some of us do.
Yeah. But for a long time, there was buckle up, fines, and all that, and they had to warn everyone. They don't do that anymore because everyone just does it. And back then, they just took care of the poor. It was just, and I believe Proverbs, Solomon tells us why. The rich and the poor have a common bond. God is their creator. He says it twice. So we would naturally discard the poor, but God, I think, had to say, I'm going to command you because they're created in my image. And we often forget that. So anyway, just side note.
There's an interesting discussion to be had there. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but there is an interesting discussion to be had there about the law, God's law, biblical morality, and the forced morality of federal government in the care for the poor and how successful that's been. I'd love to hear your opinions on that here in a little bit. But before we get into anything like that, why don't you give us just a brief history? Because some of our listeners may not even know, what Union Gospel Mission is really all about.
So it started 70 years ago. So I've been there 35, so I've got half that history. So it's been exciting to me to see how God has blessed it. But it started on what they would have called back then Skid Row. And downtown Spokane, believe it or not, before Expo came, had 27 taverns and bars in just a small block area. And it truly was Skid Row. And so mission started in the 50s all up and down the West Coast. And that's when it started, 1951. And it was to reach the homeless, the people on Skid Row. And it was strictly, they passed around a group of businessmen, passed around a plate, collected, I believe it was about $24. And they said from the very beginning, We're not going to take any government funding, and God has blessed it ever since. And so that's how the mission started there in the Skid Row area of Spokane. And then in 1971, before you even heard of homeless women and children, they began Anna Ogden Hall. And so that was the first women's and children's shelter in Spokane. So I go back when I came, the men's mission, we had totally outgrown it. 65 beds, dormitory. We were sleeping men on the chapel floor, the day room floor. So we had our capital campaign and started the mission and moved out to Trent. Now, when I came 35 years ago, if you would have said today we have 4 shelters, 3 for women and children, I would have told you that's never going to happen. That's how much it's changed since I've been there, because women and children is now the fastest growing segment of the homeless population.
Yeah.
So we've expanded because it's not enough jobs. So our stores are income, they're job producing. Our motors, job producing. Those are things that we've expanded outside of our ministry of shelter. But most people think of us as just a place people come and sleep, get something to eat. But it's important to know we have an 18-month drug rehab program. That's all Coeur d'Alene is a rehab program for women and children. We have one in Spokane, Anna Ogden Hall, and then we have 2 rescue emergency shelters. The men's shelter does both recovery and emergency shelter.
What would qualify a person to go to one of these rescue shelters?
Nothing. Oh, yes. Well, I can't say. You have to come in sober, clean, because we believe that you have to have a sober, clean environment for change to take place. What we're seeing today in the shelters that are government funded is there's no requirements. Right. And again, government puts restriction on what they do. So here we are. It's interesting, 3 guys in a bar, right? Mm-hmm. So if you guys are really seriously at a bar and we're here drinking and you're an alcoholic, how's that going to help you?
Right, right.
You know, so we believe in a clean, sober environment for people that are wanting to get out of the drugs, the addiction. They can come into a place where they're offered hope. That's huge. They've got to see other people that are saying, I've done this. Your life can be transformed. It can be changed. And then the issue, of course, that we deal, issues of the heart. I believe that all change comes out of a person's heart. So the spiritual component is front and center. And so what we do, we don't just throw it together. We do it with, I would say, if you're going to go stay in a hotel, you want to stay in a nice motel or a Hotel 6. You know, you feel good when you walk into a nice motel.
Right.
And I think in the same way, we have beautiful facilities that when people walk in, they know they're loved, they're cared for. So they get food, shelter, clothing, medical clinics in all of our shelters. Everything's there for them. And then we present the gospel every day, and it's just part of who we are and how we live out our Christian life, right. Not only in chapel services, but in demonstration of how we love people. And that's what makes a difference.
So you're ministering to a really wide swath of people. You know, mostly people, I mean, all of these people are obviously in need, but you have women and children, you have men who, you have a homeless population. You guys you have recovery clinics for alcoholism and drug abuse. You know, I mean, it's just a wide gambit of people that you minister to. So
a quick question. If somebody does come to the door and they are inebriated,
yeah,
and you say, no, can't come in here, do you have an option for them, someplace to send them to get cleaned up before they show up at the door again?
There is, thankfully. Now, if you're talking cold winter, we're not going to say take a hike, buddy. You know, we're going to bring them in, put them on the floor, and, you know, let them spend the night. But there are plenty of other shelters that they can go to. And then there's also a detox in Spokane where they can go and detox.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that we wanted to talk about, I mean, we've kind of covered who you are ministering to. It's a pretty wide swath of people. But from a Christian's point of view, particularly a pastor, I know that we have a lot of kind of preconceived notions about homeless people, and people who are struggling, and some of those misconceptions may include, how they got there, the level of mental illness. I think most of them, though, are these people just don't want to work, or they're lazy, or they would rather mooch off the government and get free drugs or alcohol, and I can't give this person money on the street because they may go out and buy drugs with it. I mean, there's a lot of kind of preconceived ideas about how Christianity deals with the homeless, or people that are in need in our communities.
Yeah.
What do you do to overcome those misconceptions, or what could we do to help to overcome those misconceptions, and where are we getting it wrong?
Well, I think one thing is sometimes when we get outside of our Christian bubble and we start hearing the stories of the people that we're working with, you begin to say, oh, if that was me, I'd probably be right where that person's at. I was blessed with godly parents, and I believe to whom much is given, much is required. And so most Christians have never been outside of the realm of great things happening, although a lot of Christian families are experiencing children that end up in addiction.
Yeah.
But what you find, and oftentimes it's trauma in people's lives, and there's a lot of pain that comes from that trauma. How do you deal with that? Well, the easiest way is drugs. It just numbs the pain, or alcohol numbs the pain.
Yeah.
So you understand how people fall into addiction. Almost always you can go back to a person and there's an event in their life, trauma. For many, it's broken families for kids, and it's the way they've handled the pain. And so then you end up with addiction. Now, there's two things that are true of most homeless people. One, addiction. Second, mental illness. Now, this will help your listeners to understand this. In order to help people today, the first and easiest way for me to help someone is to label them as mentally ill. Most people, if you get them off their drugs, they are not mentally ill. Now, there's both things going on, but a lot of what we see on the streets and with people today, acting crazy, and they're using drugs, and it appears as mental illness. Now, I don't want to undermine the reality of mental illness.
Right.
It is the hardest thing, I think, to deal with, because when a person can think clearly, you can help them. So you have people with mental illness. You have people that are on drugs. So let's just stop and say that's the majority of those that are out there on the streets in Spokane right now. So how do you go about helping them? First of all, I think this is a challenge our society has. I would ask you guys this. When did the mentally ill end up flooding our streets? We never saw this growing up as kids. Now, I want you listeners to know I'm sitting around with a bunch of young bucks, and I'm asking them a question. They probably sit there going, you're asking me, but when did it all change?
Yeah, there seems to have been a point in time where, you merged out of the 50s and the late and the early 60s, and then all of a sudden you started having a homeless problem.
Well,
didn't the state hospital have something to do with that?
Well, this is interesting. Don't ever say that movies don't have impact, because there was a movie called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That emptied,
never heard of it.
That emptied the mental institutes. If you go out to Medical Lake outside of Spokane, building after building after building, and that's where they sent the mentally ill. They even had a farm out there that some of them worked on.
Well, did the government shut down the institutions?
That's right, because we said, guess what? This is cruel to keep people locked up. We're going to give them their own freedom of choice. And so what we did... That
seems like a good idea.
We turned them loose on the streets. Yeah. And so to this day, this really breaks my heart. I think of this lady I was just talking to here about 2 months ago underneath the bridge. It's cold outside. She grew up here in Spokane. She was obviously mentally ill. She wouldn't even go into a shelter and get help. I think if we really love that person, we're going to do for them what helps them. And here we are, we can't do anything because you can't take someone in and get them the help they need unless they're what? A threat to themselves or other people. Well, she was no threat to other people.
So she's just allowed to sit out and suffer in her mental illness without any kind of aid at all.
Totally. So that's, to me, the most difficult issue. How are you going to change with the countless number of mentally ill? Now, let's go to drugs. What's happening in that arena? Well, we're talking the latest Biden pipe, which everyone jokes about, but that got changed because there was such an uproar. But if you look at what's happened, we've made it legal to shoot drugs. They don't arrest them anymore. So what you have, and then you've even got places that are giving them drugs, and drugs have become, you can donate plasma so many different ways. Of course, a lot of it's done through theft. That's why that's increasing. But, so you have this population, and I think for us as Christians, if we've never experienced a drug addiction, we don't understand the stronghold.
Yeah.
We just think, why don't you quit, man? Get a life. But that drive and that stronghold is so strong. And so I've often said, I think the best thing that often happens is they get thrown in jail. I've had several people tell me, that's the best thing that happened to me because I had to deal with my addiction. Well, today, if you look at what's happening, our jails are full.
Yeah.
I just heard this would be shocking to you guys. I just heard, do you know what community court is?
No.
Community court is for all those people that commit crimes, the homeless. Instead of sending them to the other court, they send them to community court where they hope they can work out issues and help them. It was held in our library. Our library's being remodeled, so it's somewhere else right now. And so the judge shared with a bunch of us the other day that, a lot of them don't feel comfortable coming to this new building. Well, when's the last time, because you don't feel comfortable, you don't show up for court?
Right.
So one of the guys said, well, we want to know how many people aren't showing up, and we want to know the sentencing and what's happening. Well, she told us about 3 stories of people that it really helped. But, the problem is there's no consequences anymore.
Yeah.
So, when she got done, I said, you're called to be a part of the judicial system. You've turned into a social worker. You ought to come work at the mission. But your role is to be a legislator. And that's the problem. We have lawlessness that's unheard of. If you guys don't experience it here in the area that you're in, but every day the number of businesses that are impacted by homeless lawlessness is off the charts. I'll tell your listeners, go to Spokane. Do not leave your purse in your car. You will have your window broke out and it'll be gone in a second. It is happening every day. Go to the local guys. Glass shop. My wife had it happen to her. And it was a lunchbox that looked like a purse. Poor guy didn't. But again, he got, I asked the guy, how many of these are you seeing? 40 to 60 of these we're fixing a day. That was one shop. It's crazy. And that's, it's just crime. It's associated with the drug world.
It's almost like our guilt and compassion kind of commingled, and then we're just trying to be as nice to these folks as we possibly can, to their detriment.
Yeah, what you hit the nail on the head. The compassion of society today and the government. Okay, so let's understand what we're doing. We've opened up all these shelters where there's no requirements. Okay, and then because of the law, you cannot arrest someone for sleeping on your street if you don't have a shelter. So technically, right here in your little town of Athol, if you have a park, they could go camp up there and you couldn't do a thing about it because you don't have a shelter here in Athol. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So in Spokane, we have so many homeless that unless we have a bed for everyone, we can't enforce people sleeping on the streets.
Yeah.
So we've opened up all this, and then we were going to end chronic homeless. So you know what the plan was to end chronic homeless? Housing first. So we built one unit, 50 apartments in it, and we said that'll take care of the problem. You know what? We have 6 of them now within a 3-block area. And they 50, 55 in each one. And here's what the public does not understand. Who is it that qualifies to go into that housing? They get a nice apartment. Because if we get them off the street, quote, it's going to save us money, taxpayer money, going to the hospital, all that. And if you get them a house, you're solving what? Homelessness. But you haven't addressed drugs. You haven't addressed mental illness.
You haven't got to any of the root causes.
So guess what's happened?
Yeah.
That whole area has turned into a crime area.
Yeah.
It's a big problem
They
spot
basically
in
turned into
Spokane.
slums. They're just a bunch of slums, yeah.
But what people don't know is if you 3 guys come in and you're homeless, how many years you been homeless? Oh, you've been the longest, so you go move up a few notches. Oh, but your addiction is, wow, really bad. Guess what? You just passed him. And over here...
You should have got addicted to some drugs, Greg.
I know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Ken, he's wanting change. You know what I mean? He's been to a 30, 60-day drug. Yeah, he's not even on the list. He doesn't even come close.
Because he wants help. He's not even on the list.
So there is a meritocracy at work.
That's our kid.
Yeah.
So what you end up then, who have you put in there? 50 guys in a building with addiction, fighting their friends. It just turns into a mess.
Yeah.
We have rewarded the worst of behavior and wondered why the problem's gotten worse. But it's all driven. You said it so well. It's driven because it's a compassionate thing. We don't want people on the street. Let's provide housing. And we've provided all this stuff with no accountability, no requirements, and we wonder why the problem is growing. Now, the uniqueness of Spokane, you can get breakfast, lunch, or dinner anywhere in Spokane every day of the week almost and live on the streets. So we've created this environment where different agencies are feeding, they're helping out. So it's made it conducive for me to continue in my addiction with no accountability, no desire to change. And believe me, you know as well as I do, feed an addiction, you're never going to get out of it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all we've done. And we've labeled it compassion.
Yeah, allow them to stay in their comfort, whatever that is, even though it's to their detriment.
We've recreated Skid Row.
Yeah.
After getting rid of it.
Yeah, it was cleaned up.
Real quick, can we back up to the lady under the overpass?
Yeah.
Doesn't want to go anywhere. Doesn't want help, so to speak. What is does she have an option? Or is she just stuck there?
She's stuck there until she comes to a place where she says, I want help. But let me ask you, is a mentally ill person capable of doing that? No,
absolutely not.
No. So she will be there until she dies.
Okay.
Yeah, because I remember when we asked her, I don't, no, shelters. Something about that just, you know what I mean? And no one has the ability to go to her and say, you're coming with us. We're going to take you over here and get you the help you need.
But as you said, she has the ability to go get breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Yeah. She knows how to survive.
And even the necessities to survive under that bridge.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should just jump right into this because it seems like there is a disconnect between what is useful for people that find themselves in this situation for whatever trauma or whatever reason they end up being in that situation, and the policies that have been created to quote unquote help them. And this obviously speaks to the government's role in being involved in the care of the homeless. And I have my own opinions about whether the government should be involved in social issues or not. I believe that those things should be reserved for the communities that take care of them. But that being said, what are some of the policies that are in effect for particularly your area that need to change in order for you guys to actually be able to help these people?
Well, it's interesting because right now it has become such an issue in Spokane that the business community has stepped up. I'm on a mayor's task force. There's a lot of people talking about the problem and how to solve it. And right now there's a heavy emphasis on the chronic homeless. And again, when you define homelessness with the word that I just said, what?
Chronic?
Yeah, but homelessness. Mm-hmm. What's the answer? Home.
Oh,
yeah.
A housing.
Gotcha.
And so what everyone talks about is the crisis in the housing. What they don't talk about is the individuals that are sleeping on the street, that are addicts. They've had housing.
Yeah.
But their addiction, they couldn't even keep it. And they're not fit to take care of it until they deal with their addiction. Instead of saying we have a homeless problem, we've got to say we've got a addiction problem in our country. It's a picture of, two things. Lawlessness and addiction are what's destroying our cities. And it flows out of addiction, a lot of the lawlessness.
Even more so than mental illness, you would say.
Oh, yeah. The drugs is what's messing people up and drives people to crime, too. And so what I think we've got to understand is we've got to address it as an addiction problem, not homelessness, because we'll continue to build more and more housing, more and more programs that do not work. Now, they will say we need to build more of these programs, and we need to get case managers, we need to get people in there, counselors, mental health, addiction recovery. We all would say that makes sense. Let's do that. Because we built the housing, but we didn't provide this. Well, we did, because a lot of the funding, they had to have a case manager. But let's just stop here. You can have mental illness, addiction recovery, all those things available in the housing. Mm-hmm. But if you continue to say to people, it's your choice, what happens? They sit in their office, no one goes to them, and we assume that people want help and they want out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we put all these programs into the average person. Makes total sense.
Yeah, whether they have addiction or mental illness, they're not capable of saying, I'm done, I'm ready to have some help now.
You can
in most cases.
And one thing I've learned, I can't change anyone, just me.
Yeah.
And until a person wants help, we can do thousands of things. Jesus always said what? Come unto me. He never healed someone without asking, like the blind man, what is it you want? I always said, Jesus, what kind of question is that?
Right,
you know what he wants.
Right.
But it was, I think, telling us until we want it. And so as a culture, our compassion is we want to do all this stuff, and we believe in doing it, people are going to change.
Tell us about your program.
Yeah.
And how impactful that is for Spokane, and maybe your success rate, if you can share that with us.
You know what I love is that when people go through a 30, 60-day, you just always hear over and over. I've had people who've been through 5 of those treatment programs. What I love about our program is it's 18 months. It ends in a job, but let's just go back to the beginning. It starts by dealing with the woundedness. It starts by giving them a perspective of who God is, their unconditional love, understanding their identity. With most people, forgiveness is right there at the top of that recovery. And I have seen families restored, people restored, stories that you wouldn't believe of people's past and what God does to transform the heart and transform the person. And all of them that go through our program, the very last part of the program, the last phase, they go out and do an internship. So I would look around the table and say, men, how has God wired you? What do you want to do that you enjoy in life? Not just go get a job at a fast food restaurant or, Walmart or somewhere, but what's your career? What do you want to do? And we do the life language test to find out their giftedness and who it is that God's made them to be. And then we have them do an internship with a company. We have over 200 companies, businesses that our people do internships. And then 8 out of 10 are hired after they do their internship.
Wow.
And as you know right now, people are hurting to find people to go to work for them.
Yeah.
So it's no problem. In fact, every year for the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, we've placed 200 people on jobs. This last year it was 500.
Wow.
And again, the people that end up, when you think of homelessness, that are hurting and they had things go wrong, they don't go directly to the streets. They come to us. They get the support, the help, and we get them back out there, get them going again. Mm-hmm. You know, the people that end up oftentimes on that street, it's addiction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're not wanting help at that point. So, but we have people that are laying out there on the street under the bridge, and all of a sudden one day, wow, I want something different, you know, and they'll come our way too. But again, our program is really intense. It's hard work. There's a lot of pain in that journey. But, you know, when I think of Jesus discipling the 12 men, he lived with them every day. He walked with them every day. And what I love about our ministry is we get to live with these people. We get to show up and be with them every day. We have professional counselors. Everything is offered, and it's great. It's just a discipleship process, day to day, walked out, you know. And again, when you're coming off drugs, you're going through it is a up and down valley, but to be there to support them, it is, and to see the life change is so encouraging.
Wow.
Yeah. You said we, so you obviously depend on a lot of volunteers.
Oh, yes.
As well as staff.
Yes.
What does that look like?
Well, we have over 600 volunteers that give 4 hours or more a week.
Wow.
And we like to think of them just like staff. You come in, you interview, we find out what area of the ministry you want to serve, and we plug you in. And you come along side of staff and serve with them. And so we right now have over 200 staff, but a lot of those staff are in our stores, the motors, you know, but we have them spread throughout our 4 shelters.
That's amazing.
Amen.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you guys obviously are focusing on the recovery and focusing on trying to get to the kind of core of what is affecting those people. And the biggest piece of that obviously is that they need Jesus.
Yeah.
And so you guys are really focusing on that. Has that morphed over the years, or has that kind of been a constant in UGM?
No, I would say when I first came, we would have a Bible study in the morning, and then we would meet a person on the program then met 1 hour a week with a counselor. There is now classes that they attend, boundaries, identity. There are so many, the road to the wound. What we've done is we've gone so much deeper to understand trauma, the impact, and if you don't go back and deal with that trauma, it just rears its ugly head later on. So I think Christians for a long time have thought, just give me Jesus, and if they just bring them to salvation, everything changes.
Right.
But there's wounded, there's pain, and how do you deal with that in people's life? And I think so often we think it just goes away, and it's part of a journey. Yeah. And that healing, we need to dive in and go deep. And what I love is we've gotten some tools that really help. The Genesis process is one of them. In fact, a lot of churches are starting to do the Genesis process because people that have addictions and woundedness and pain are coming to church every Sunday too.
Yeah.
They're not just homeless and on the streets. So how do we help people heal in that process? And here's what I say. Every story, the people we deal with, how were they wounded? And I'll guarantee it was by another person. Mm-hmm. How are they healed? By healthy people, another person in their life that comes along and helps heal that process. So it's interesting. The very thing that wounds is the very thing that heals. So we create a safe healing environment where people can come in, be loved, accepted for who they are, be honest. You can be in our program. You can say, I don't believe in this God stuff. We love to hear that, talk through it, and let them see the love of Jesus, and then they all of a sudden, it changes.
Yeah.
But, it's exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about the youth ministry piece of UGM.
Yeah, that started, Danny Beard's a good friend. He was one of my first hires. He worked for NBC camps for years. And I said, Danny, why don't we run a camp for kids? Because you may recognize this name, Howard Hendricks. He said when a kid goes to camp for a week, he'll learn more in that week than an entire year of Sunday school. Yeah. And it's just something about the environment that's so powerful. So we started a camp, and then a gentleman by the name of Dick Shanks came along. We were renting a camp, and we could only have it Friday, Saturday. We go up Friday afternoon, come back Saturday night. And so Dick Shanks comes along and offers us this piece of property, 120 acres out below Long Lake Dam, right on the Spokane River.
Wow.
And so we opened up camps, and we run them for underprivileged kids. And I never will forget, we used to have the counselors go out, spend the week with the kids, bring them back into town, and this little boy was sitting at the front office waiting for his mom, and I said, hey, let me take you home. So I drive over into the East Central neighborhood, kind of a rough area town, and I'm about a block from his house, and he starts yelling, hey, there's Uncle Johnny, there's Uncle Johnny. He's all excited. He's just spent a week at camp. And I says, hey, tell me what you love about Uncle Johnny. Oh, he always gives me candy. Well, I looked there at Uncle Johnny, and he was your local pimp. He had the Cadillac, the dress.
Oh, boy.
You know what I'm thinking? We just spent a week with this kid. Now we're sending him back to Uncle Johnny. That's when we changed our philosophy.
Yeah.
So now churches, their youth group, they go and they work with our staff, but they're there present with the kids. So when the kids come back, there's a relationship that's been established through that whole week-long experience that now they start going to those churches where they've built that relationship with the counselors and the kids that help out. So what we're seeing is not sending them back to just Uncle Johnny with no help, but now they've got a support base around them, and these kids start attending church. We do after-school mentoring, and we're building bridges to help bring people into their life that are healthy. And that's what these kids need. So our youth ministry focuses on
That's amazing.
that.
Do you think that's having any effect on homelessness and addiction in general, or do you think that, is that even a trackable number?
Well, I think it's heading some kids in a positive direction that otherwise would have headed off completely in a different. And in some cases, I love telling this story. There was, over where our women's shelter is, crisis shelter, this family sent their kid. And he went to camp, and he was changed so much that the parents came to know Jesus. They weren't married. She said, the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. They had 3 different kids from different families. It was just a mess. And then they did a video to show the change in this family. And when they showed the video, I go, this is phony, guys. Because they were walking through a neighborhood holding hands and nice home. And I go, I know where these people live.
Right.
And the pastor said, this is not phony. This is what happens when God restores a life.
Wow.
Every area changes, the financial, everything.
Yeah.
And that's so true. We know that, but you forget, So that all happened just because a kid went to camp.
Yeah,
His whole
it's
family was
interesting.
changed.
If you read any of the literature of the great revivals of the past, when these revivals would enter into these communities, crime would cease. God would move in these communities, and people would change, and the communities would clean up, and the lawns would get nice, and it was amazing what would happen in these month-long revivals that would take place. It seems like it's that kind of when you get God involved in the lives of people, He only makes them better.
Yeah.
I know that people have had bad experiences with Christians in the past. They're still human. A lot of them probably just think that they're Christians. But for the most part, when the Holy Spirit enters into the life of a believer and changes them, creates in them a new creature, there's a definite positive change that takes place. And so I think that's what you're seeing, is that it's almost like a little tiny revival kind of taking place.
Totally. And it's what I love is the transformation. It's so extreme,
Yeah.
And the stories are just remarkable.
Well, that's how you know it's God, right?
Yeah.
It's like if it's an extreme thing, then it's something that only God could do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love to see that kind of change. Those stories just are amazing to me. So we've already talked a little bit about, like, you are partnering with some of the local government, and they're trying to do a lot of the housing type things. What do you feel like the role of the government really should be in the care of the homeless?
Well, we just, former Governor Christy Gregoire just shared with our group the other day. It's amazing. We've come to a place today as a culture that people expect the government to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And that was evident in this survey. It was really evident. And if you've looked at what's happening in Seattle, it's coming to Spokane.
Oh, Lord.
More and more people on
We
the street.
just took a trip, my wife and I. We were traveling over to the Northwest Baptist Convention annual meeting, and we took a trip down from Centralia down to a place down in Oregon where we have some friends that live, and we passed through Portland.
Yeah.
And it was abysmal. I mean, it was like, as you're driving down the interstate, you're looking to the left and right, and all you see along the highway, I mean, literally tent upon cardboard box upon, you know, I mean, they're just stacked up in droves just all the way through the whole city. And it just seems to me like whatever it is that the government thinks that they're doing, it's failing.
And those cities that have the largest number of homelessness, San Francisco, you go down the list, Seattle, they're the cities where we've poured the most money into to solve the problem. And by the way, I don't know how often your listeners get into Spokane, but we've got a tent city now that's about 50, 60 people right off the freeway at Freya. It's kind of a protest thing, and they aren't able to even deal with that. And you're starting to see tents pop up along the freeway, but most of it's downtown and other areas.
Well, we saw that coming back out of Spokane when you take the turn right there at the Civic Center, and you go under the little overpass to get to the on-ramp to go back to Coeur d'Alene. I forget the name of that road there, but in that overpass, there were tents in that overpass as you were going through. And just people just kind of wandering around, milling about, you know, doing, you know, whatever it is that they're doing. You know, I mean, it was.
So if I were to ask you guys, how many homeless people you think in Spokane are sleeping on the streets, what would you say?
Oh, I have no idea. I wouldn't even know how to hazard a guess.
How would you count them?
I don't know, 5,000?
The homeless count's coming up pretty soon. I'd say we have about 500 easily.
Okay.
And being here, working with the homeless for 35 years, that's a staggering number. We've never seen anything like that. You've always, in my early years, you had the Vietnam vets that would not want to come in, but they wouldn't leave piles of trash. They would take care of where they stayed. But now it's just kind of a cultural thing that people don't want to be in a shelter. I call them the shelter-resistant people. So even though we're going to pour all this government money and build shelters, they still don't want to come in.
Right.
And they have their reasons. You know, they'll tell you their stuff gets stolen or who knows what. And people like this judge that I referred to earlier are compassionate and feel like, oh, maybe shelters aren't the answer. How can we help them, you know? So you just go on and on. But, yeah, the expectation is the government will solve the problem. So I just say to people, how's that worked? How's the postal system?
Yeah, how's that
How's
working
everything the government has ever done? Has it ever worked?
Look at education.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that they get involved with just kind of goes downhill.
Yeah.
If we've got 500 homeless just in Spokane, how many are in the shelters? In order to get a ratio.
Yeah, that's good. I would say the shelter count, I think, was 1,050 ballpark figure that people that are sleeping in shelters.
Are they full? Are the shelters full?
No. Okay. I can tell you our shelters, men's shelter, has never been full.
Really?
Never. Again, because of the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
The others, boom, no problem. But some of them are full, but they're still open bed nights. And they're trying to get a system so that they can track every night how many beds are available so they can start enforcing.
Mm-hmm.
But when they opened the convention center, if you read that article in the paper, you know, they had 400, I think, that were staying in there. It cost them, what was it? I'm drawing a blank. Over 100. It was, what was it? $200,000 a week to operate it. They operate it for 2 weeks. It was $400,000, and then there was another $100,000 worth of damage. That was that was for 2 weeks to try to provide. I think that opened up people's eyes that this compassion, they looked at it a little differently. We open up our convention center. We want to help the homeless, and then what do? They destroy the place.
Do you think there is an appetite for a paradigm shift in the way that government deals with homeless?
Yes.
You know, kind of focusing more on the addiction, mental illness, kind of core trauma issues?
I will say this. It's like I said, Christian Governor Gregoire, she said, you know, we need to build more shelters. And the housing we need to provide, what? Recovery and mental illness counsel. But what they don't
But you need to make it a requirement for the people to go to it.
That's where it goes south. They're not ready to do that. They still believe in their minds if we build it, it'll change them. And if we offer these services, it'll change people. And they don't understand that we have a free will.
Yeah.
And they don't understand the power of addiction.
And addiction will always cause your free will to choose the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
It's bondage.
How many of these people that are proposing just more and more housing have spent any time with the homeless? Spent a night, volunteered?
That's
seen
a good
it up
question.
front and personal and realized homes are just not going to be the full answer.
Yeah, and we're telling them we need housing's the problem. And there are people that are not capable of taking care of themselves or their housing. You know, it's just the whole thing is so crazy. But we're continuing to do more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the emphasis is going. Now, they will say we're going to start measuring and have accountability. But housing first was going to solve the problem. And the more of it we've built, the more chronic homelessness we've seen in Spokane. So, again, I don't know at what point you say it's broken. Now, one thing I know that would make a huge difference is if they had requirements for housing first and they had accountability, then that housing could be a real positive thing. I'd love to see that happen in our city.
Where do you even begin with that battle, though? Like, how do you begin to change the minds of the politicians that are out there?
Well, the continuum of care in every city makes the decision, and that's where it has to change. Our city council controls a lot of what happens. So, again, where you have conservative people that believe in accountability and what have you, you see less of this taking place. And so it's the mindset of how people see individuals, what they believe. So if you believe people can do drugs and eventually you put them in a house and that's going to change them, what are you going to do? You're going to continue to do it.
So it really is the kind of like hyper compassionate, no accountability kind of liberalism that is feeding into the entirety of the crisis.
Man is basically good. He will make the best decisions for himself. Right. And yet it doesn't happen, but we continue to deny it, you know?
Yeah.
Everything around us is, it's sad. And it's sad because there are people that are creating the image of God with tremendous potential.
Right.
And
if they could just get the help that they need with their addiction and with the mental illness kind of issue. But it's hard because, like, churches' hands are tied when it comes to managing, like, recovery centers and things like that. You know, I mean, it's like it seems like we have a friend of ours, Tim Remington, that runs the altar.
I know Tim well.
And he's always kind of getting assaulted by, you know, political kind of ideologies and governmental leaders, and they would love to see that place shut down. And I'm not for or against anything that's gone over there. I don't really know the whole story about some of the accusations and things like that, but it seems to me like every time that somebody comes along that wants to create something to help, it's like there's this effort to shut it down in the name of compassion. because there's a level of accountability expected.
Well, I'll tell you, I've had others just blast us for what we do. If you really love people, why aren't you letting them come in, drinking, using, what have you? I mean, what kind of love is that? You know what I mean? And that's Christians. They go, I just can't believe you call yourself a Christian organization and you would do that. Christ would love them right where they're at and bring them in. And so, again,
yeah, that's actually not true, because Christ expected repentance to come into his family.
Yeah, well, again, you go, who do I care about? I care about the person that wants help. And I know that if I let people in that are using, the whole place will turn into, it just doesn't make any sense. But again, I just think that it's this myth that we don't understand the depth of deception and the wickedness of man's heart. And I just don't. It's our culture.
Yeah.
So UGM is not a homeless shelter. What would you call yourself?
Well, I would say we're serving the homeless. We're serving the homeless that want help. We're serving I love what our chaplain said, Sonny Westbrook. He said, all we do is spread the table, put the best food on it, invite people in. But we can't force ourselves on anyone, but we're going to have a standard to what that looks like in terms of spreading the table. Because if you spread the table and you allow addiction and all that stuff, the whole place changes.
Yeah.
So all we can do is, I think, do what Christ did, invite. Christ went to sinners, but he never joined in with them. He never supported an environment of sin anywhere in the scriptures that I can find. He brought people out of that environment and set them free. And so you don't have to identify and become part of that environment to say you're going to change people. You create the environment that offers hope and life change. And that's what we do. And I tell people, we can only help the people that want help. And when you support the mission, that's what you're supporting. You're really making a difference in the lives of a homeless person that wants help. And that's the only ones we can help.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And as a culture, we have to wrestle with how we deal with those that don't want help and end up affecting our communities, our businesses. That's what we're struggling with right now. What do you do for those that are lawless? Are we going to enforce laws or make it like they have? Oh, you know what?
Do they get a pass because they're homeless and they're addicted?
So you can steal up to how many, $100, $200, and there's no consequences?
Yeah, it's shocking watching the footage from California, closed circuit TV of just homeless people walking in and just taking whatever they want and walking out, and the shopkeeper's just like, you can't do nothing about it.
I think it's $900 there, is it not?
$1 is too much.
Yeah.
Compassion.
That's not just the homeless.
That's compassion.
Compassion at our cost.
Yeah. Well, compassion at their cost, because they're not getting the help that they need by just being allowed to be, mischievous. I mean, that's not helping anybody. So I can see where you're coming from, and it seems like there should be a way that we can get involved to help our politicians to understand that just building another homeless shelter is not going to help the problem. It's only going to exacerbate it.
Well, what's homelessness look like in your area?
Right.
You don't really have a problem. You don't have a lot of shelters. You don't have a lot of...
We got one guy.
I think we got one homeless guy here.
One guy.
Yeah.
Is that all?
That's all.
I met him.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy. He's homeless by choice. I mean, he's like, he won't take your help if you ask him. Yeah.
But he's probably not leaving a bunch of garbage everywhere he goes.
No, he's a really, he takes care of the stuff that's around, sometimes he'll go to the park and he'll draw stuff on the basketball court because he's playing some kind of game for himself or whatever, because he's bored. But other than that, it's he's a pretty decent guy.
He is.
It's strange, seeing the one homeless guy in town, and then thinking about the fact that just down the street, like 20 minutes down the street, there's 500 people out
Yeah, well, what's
You
the
know.
population of Athol?
Yeah.
6?
6, 7,
5.
somewhere in there.
So
5
the
people.
entire city of Athol were homeless. It's just a giant homeless camp out here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
pastors,
that's true.
pastors, would it shock you if I told you that, and I can't believe I'm going to say this right now, but I would say that Christians might be responsible for a lot of the homelessness in America today, because in their heart to love people, they've enabled
Yeah.
and kept people there.
Yeah.
And they reach out because, and I believe it's a heart of compassion and love,
Yeah.
but it's compassion that's misdirected. And they end up bringing clothes, blankets, food, and they just keep people right where they're at on the street. And they leave feeling good. But what have they really done? I
Yeah.
often said I'd like to do a commercial. You know how people drive up and hand out. I like to do a commercial and say what you're really doing is drive up and have a guy pull out a gun and go, boom. You're just killing the person many times because you're feeding their addiction. And what does it look like to love that person enough? You know, the prodigal son woke up one day and said, this is rough.
Wait, hold on.
I want help.
Let's take a pause here, because
Okay.
that brings up an interesting point, because you hear Christians all the time say that I always take around extra money, and when I see the guy on the side of
Yeah.
the road, I always
Yeah.
give him money.
Yeah.
Or, you know, it's like, because
Yeah.
they're responsible for what they do with it. I'm just responsible for being kind. You would disagree with that sentiment, huh?
Totally. Well, yeah, when you go out, I remember I know the guy that started it, the cardboard.
Right?
And that whole thing, that didn't happen when I first came to the mission. That's something that's, you know what I mean? You would be shocked how much those guys. I've seen a TV guy go out and do it and then report on how much money he made. I've seen a TV crew follow a guy down under Maple Street, follow him. They got their money, went into that store that used to be, I think, Safeway, filmed them buying alcohol, followed them back to their house and banged on their door and say, hey, and they go, you get that, you know, the bunch of language.
Right.
But they showed exactly what's happening with people's money, that it's just supporting addiction.
That's really interesting. I think that's powerful coming from someone who deals in the, I mean, I don't, what do you, quote unquote industry, I guess. I don't, like, what is it, a homeless industry? I don't know. But like, that's completely diametrically opposed to the way that most Christians think about homelessness.
Yeah.
So what is that percentage? I mean, it's not 100% of those people out there.
99.95.
I'm asking Phil.
Hold on. What percent is the homeless that are
that are taking advantage of.
Hey, the
us.
home. I always say the homeless that want help are in the shelter like ours, or another one at least. They're not on the street.
So
They're
Chris
not
is
on
right.
the street.
99.5% are.
They're
taking
not
advantage of
They're
it.
not on the street. I could tell you story after
Well,
story.
let me tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
30 years ago, 30 years ago, I took a group of kids over to UGM in Spokane.
Yeah.
And to tours the facility and just talk with the guys and everything. And the guy running the place at the time, he said that he carried around extra $20 bills. And that was a lot of money back then.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime he saw a homeless person, he would give him $20. And it was like, why would you do that? And he says, because I was homeless. And I was one of the guys that was really trying to better myself. And that $20 helped. What do you have to say to that? I mean,
I'd like to know who that guy was.
He got fired, I'm sure.
But I do think there are situations where God's prompting in the Holy Spirit, and there's ways that we are truly helping people. I do believe that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I do believe that when you see people alongside of the road with a sign and that situation, when there's other services available, you know, it's like the guy pulled up, God bless, Vietnam vet, need help. And I pulled up, how you doing? Oh, sir, he says, you don't know how hard it is. Sir, do you know what it's like to get up every day?
You're their worst nightmare.
And,
know who I am.
know. And he says, you know what it's like to get up every day and look in the mirror and have to hold this sign? He goes, oh, sir. I said, you know, hey, there's a great place in town. You ever been down to the Union Gospel Mission? They've got everything you need. You don't have to hold a sign. I said,
Yeah, but then
him.
I can't smoke and drink, so forget you.
No, he said, oh, sir, I've been down there. That place is full. They don't have any room. And I said,
That's strange because I just did the spreadsheet on it and it seemed to be okay.
I just said, hey, I worked there and we got all the room in the world. And you know what? He had called me sir 3 or 4 times. All of a sudden, profanity and anger. Get out of my blankety blank spot. You're blank, And I'm just saying, if only we knew what's really going on. They've learned the system. And if you can, I say this all the time, why are they standing out there doing it? Because they're getting money. If they weren't getting any money,
they weren't getting
wouldn't.
anything. Yeah,
totally.
That's interesting. I think that's powerful because that kind of that changes my mind a little bit. I mean, I'm like actually thinking about, because I've never been the guy to go and give people money just on the side of the street. I've never kind of been that way. I've always kind of had this kind of eerie feeling about it. I've never really been able to hammer down a reason why I don't do it. And like when people talk about the fact that we should and that they do, there's always kind of this guilty kind of maybe I should be doing that or something. But then to hear the opposite kind of discussion about it, it's like, oh yeah, maybe it is you pull up and the Holy Spirit specifically speaks to you. It's not just go up and every person you see, hand them a $20 bill.
Yeah.
So, Phil, how long has this been your mantra then? It's something we need to get out.
Yeah. Well, we put little cards together, and we put a granola bar with it, and we go up and we say, hand this to them. And say, hey, if you want, they have everything you need. Just go to the mission.
That's brilliant.
And here's the map, tells you where to go. I mean, how many have you taken someone to a gas station to help them out with gas?
Yeah.
And only find that it clicks right after you almost begin to fill it up.
Yeah.
And, again, I think we just need wisdom. There's so many con jobs and people and Christians. I never will forget this. There was a pastor's convention in a city, and I don't know the name of the city, but the chief of police came and said to all those pastors that got together in that city, you guys are the problem. And he just told them, you're the problem because you're down here feeding and keeping people right where they're at. And again, I think sometimes I think a great Christian study would be, what is compassion?
Yeah.
When you look at what Jesus did, what we're called to do in the world today, what does compassion really look like? And I think we do compassion today oftentimes how it makes us feel.
Yeah.
So when you drive by and you give someone $15, $20, $5, you drive away going, boy, he's just standing there. He doesn't have anything. Look at me in my nice car, and boy, I was sure nice. I helped him out.
I feel so good now. Yeah. It's almost like Christian virtue signaling, almost.
Yeah. So, again, I think we got to say, did we really help him? That's when, did the helping really help or did it hurt?
Yeah.
And a lot, here's the other thing that I'll say about the mission that I've learned. When people come to our facility versus the government facilities, guess what, guys? If you're coming to my government facility, I can't expect anything from you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when people come to our facility, we have them do a chore. Now, why do we do that? We do that because we believe they're created in the image of God, and when they give back, they restores their dignity.
Mm-hmm.
We as a culture are taking people's dignity away by enabling and not expecting or requiring anything. It literally makes a person feel worthless. And that's what we've done in all of our charity and all of our government funding. Hey, you got the nicest place in town, these brand new apartments. What did you do? I used drugs. I didn't do anything. How good? Why do they destroy them? There's no value there. But what if you said, hey, you want a better life? You're willing to attend a class. You're willing to begin to work on your finances. You're willing to deal with your addiction. You get the nicest apartment. You're restoring dignity.
Yeah, it's meritocracy at its best.
Yeah. That's what's missing from government programs is they're literally taking away dignity, not even restoring that work ethic that God is a God of work that he's built in all of us, and we've taken it away.
Yeah, there's so many brilliant pieces to that. I think Christians really should pay attention to.
I'm starting to feel real bad about my life.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel really justified. I'm like, I'm feeling great. I'm like, yeah, I've often thought these
Save
things,
me
and now I got Phil agreeing with me. I'm like, yeah,
And I'm going to save $100 a month.
This also has.
I told you all this compassion and stuff will get you in trouble, Greg.
Yeah.
This has interesting implications too for church benevolence ministries.
Yes.
Is it a hand up or a handout?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good place to start if you're
Yeah.
a church.
Yeah.
And you're not going to start a mission. You're not going to partner with UAGM or whatever. But do you have a benevolence ministry?
And how does it operate?
How does it operate? Does it enable people to climb up out of it, or does it just keep them where they
I
are?
don't know. Don't ask me.
Oh, so let's just take a minute and go off that.
Greg's
because
passing the buck as usual.
That's an easy partnership, right?
This has been a concern of mine, churches that open food banks. After a person continues to come back after a year, what is that about, and how are you helping them?
Yep.
And yet we feel good. Look at what we're doing.
Right.
And, this will bring people into the church. What about the benevolence when we give out money? We want to help you. How about attending a financial class? Because we don't want to continue to have to do this. We want to help you. That's what's helping.
Yeah.
So we, again, give it out. We do these food banks. And I'm like, our goal is that I told this one church has a huge food bank. You got to have up here on the wall. Our goal is that after a short time, we would help you in a way that you wouldn't have to come back.
Yeah.
And then you'd feel good.
Yeah. You've actually elevated someone out of their situation.
And so if you've followed what's happened with food banks, I don't know if it's just a growing industry. We have so many people we're supporting and are dependent. Look at our schools. We never fed kids when I went to school. Now, in some of our schools, 80 to 90% of the kids are getting breakfast every morning. And guess what? When school's out, we're going to do it in the summer. We have to turn to the government, to these programs, to continue to do what was never intended for the government to take care of. And we're making them dependent on what? The government, food, rather than independence.
It's almost like the government has come in and taken over social benevolence from the local community and the churches and turned it into forced compassion. And it's just not working out. It's like there's no accountability. There's no striving to increase your situation or get you into a better place in life. There's no, there's nothing beyond just the next handout.
It's kind of the definition of socialism, right?
Yeah.
Well,
more or less.
And we have contributed to that here at our church with grocery cards and gas cards. And it took us less than, I think, 4 or 5 months to realize that people were showing up.
Oh, yeah, you have regulars.
End of that 30 days. That we put
you have regulars. They come in and they like they're on a rotation, so they know this is the amount of time that you have to wait to go get this, to stay reasonable. And
people
same time every month
within families working together to get those. And so we're probably contributing somewhat.
Well, it's hard because you don't want to completely eliminate the need that people might have right off the bat. It's like you can't help someone to rise above their circumstances if they're starving to death.
Right.
So there is a line that has to be drawn, but at a certain point, it's like, okay, you're just abusing the system. You're done. Right. Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about this too. What's easiest to do? Give them their food. Help them out.
Yeah.
The hard part is the relational, getting engaged in their life, finding out what they really need, and helping them through their issues. I say that in recovery too. You can help people, you can feed them, clothe them, but the messy part is the hard work of, hey, I want to talk to you about something that's hard here, but you need to grow, you need to change, we want to help you here. A culture, we don't press into people's life. We, stay away. Let people do for themselves. And we don't love people with that hard kind of love, speaking that hard truth. So if you come and get food, guess what? We want to, can we help you look at your finances and understand, is this really a need, or are there other areas that you can not be dependent on us?
There's so many tiers to why it's failing that it's intimidating to look at how to fix it. You know, I mean, you have, from the Christian perspective, you have people that are just continuing to perpetuate the problem through compassion, that are not realizing that they're not actually elevating anyone out of anything.
Yeah.
And then you have the government, who is actually contributing to the problem by not actually trying to get to the root of the issue, which is drug abuse, mental illness, things of that nature. And then you just have the community at large that they would rather just pay the government to deal with it. And so it's like, there's so much complacency and just other things at work. It's like, it almost seems like, where do you even begin? You know,
Well, we begin with this, that I think is important. It's a snapshot. Homelessness, drug abuse is a snapshot of the spiritual condition of our country.
right?
And if we don't understand that it's going to take God to change it, we'll continue to try to do everything to solve a problem that's a hard issue.
Yeah.
And we won't solve it. And, we've created a lot of... When I went to school, and you guys... Did you have a lunch program for certain kids?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and you knew the percent of kids when I went through school that were on that lunch, it was kind of a shame thing.
Yeah,
They
nobody
kinda
wanted to be on it because you'd be considered poor. Yeah.
Right, and they kind of didn't make a big deal out of it. Now when you consider that a school has 80, 90%, or even higher, some of our schools in Spokane, you've just created a whole culture of expectation of what? Government to take care of you. It's totally done a 180. And again, it's opened the door for what? Socialism, what we're seeing.
Yep.
Government, take care of the homeless, take care of my food, government owes me health care, government owes me housing. Where does it take us?
Yeah, and it only leads us to more people on the street.
Yeah.
So
basically.
we're involved in the local elementary school here with clothing and with snacks and with lunch programs and all of that. How would we curb that? What would you say would be the best way, the easiest way, the smartest way to start curbing that and creating within the school the idea of training the families?
Right.
It's not the kids' fault.
Right.
It's the families.
Right.
You got to get into the families and do that. Is that through school boards? Is that through the teachers unions? I mean, how do we do that?
I think the teachers have a great understanding of the student and oftentimes what's happening.
They do.
And so but again, this is where we're at. It takes me right back to our conversation about mental illness. That person that needs the help, why can't the school say to the parents, we've got a church here, we got people that want to help you, and we want to stop just giving your kids stuff. We want to get to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
Because we realize there's
Provide
something
some
happening in the family that they can't provide or take care of. Is it legit? Great, let's help out. But if it's a parent that's just using drugs or doing stuff, let's go in and help that family deal with that. Or we don't go to that level today.
Get them into a program and help
We're,
them to be a part of a program or something like that. Get to the root of the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I call the tough love that is nowhere to be found in our culture and our society today, because everyone, freedom to do what you want, whatever you do is good for you, and in the meantime, people are killing themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sad.
Yeah.
It really is.
Gosh, there's so much that we could talk about. We could probably sit here for 3 hours and just discuss all the things that are going on. Maybe we should talk about having you back, Phil.
Yeah,
for a second episode.
Yeah, sure. I enjoyed being with you guys. I just want the listeners to know that there's no brewskis around the bar. That we're all drinking water.
Yeah.
You 3 pastors in a bar. I thought I'm going to come up here and speak about the effects of alcohol, and I'll have to lecture you guys. But anyway, it's been fun.
The fun thing about it is that when we first started that, the whole concept was that we were going to have people on that don't necessarily agree with us. And so, we, like with Joe Evans, Joe Evans is obviously not a heavy church-going guy, and he's, kind Idaho, great guy. Some disagreements on, what medical marijuana looks like and things like that. But, that was the heart of it. But also, it's just like it's a great place to talk about things like this and get different perspectives and
that's what I like about what you're doing, and I think what would be great is to bring in a government official that's sold on housing first and all that.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have a conversation, an open listening to each other, and kind of, in a sense, debate. It's gone from our culture. It's just a
civil discourse is gone. There's no more.
You can agree to disagree, but let's put the facts out. Let's ask the questions, and that. I think
we had our local representative on, but we never hit housing.
Well, it's not. There's so much to focus on. It's like it's certainly on the list, but it's like I don't know where it registers on the list of concerns for, particularly like Idahoan representatives, because there's just so much to deal with. But yeah, I would love to hear what a government official's opinion is on the homelessness issue, particularly in like Spokane or even Coeur d'Alene. I would love to hear what they have to say and have the debate on, why is it that we're not working together on that? That was the question that we asked when we did our church and the mental health issue or our episode. Was why is there no coordination between mental health professionals and church workers? Because it seems like we're dealing with the same group of people with the same issues, but we have no crossover for whatever reason. And so it seems like if the government would trust us a little bit and we would trust those that are in charge a little bit, that we could actually come to some type of a compromise that could actually help people. But right now, it seems so fractured, and when something is fractured like that, it's like it seems like the solutions are out of sight, almost.
The number of mental illness workers is so limited. All of our hospitals are filled. There's no place for them. It is a sad scenario, and to me, addiction is one thing, but mental illness is heart-wrenching.
It is.
There's no answer that's simple, quick, and easy fix. It is complicated, but I know this: we're not going to help people if we can't refrain them and get them the help they need. Ken
shared some verses here that I'd like to read through to kind of start closing us out. And one of them was Isaiah 58, 6-8. Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, do you cover him, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh? Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up speedily, and righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. You look at verses like that and some of the things that Jesus said, particularly like in Matthew 25, 31 through 40, and I'll let our listeners look that up later if they'd like, but there's definitely a place that Christians must be involved in the homeless and the needy and the poor and the impoverished and the oppressed. And there is a place where Christians must be involved with that. And I think the question is how? and what is the right way to do that. And I think we've kind of itched that a little bit. I mean, I think that's just the tip of the iceberg in talking about what Christians should and should not do. But knowing that we have something that we should be doing kind of leads me into how can our listeners get involved with Union Gospel Mission?
Well, I think for them to know that we're helping those that want help and that are truly needy is critical. And they're in a place of accountability. They're in a place that they're going to get the gospel. They're going to get the healing they need. I think that's an investment worth making.
Yeah.
And you're not just handing someone a $20 bill. You're not just, enabling. You're really helping. And that's what I love about when I'm not afraid to say that's what you're doing when you support the mission. Mm-hmm. You're helping those that want help. And you're doing what God called us to do, to help the poor, the less fortunate. And you're doing it in a way that's making a difference. We're not interested in building facilities and housing 100 people, next year 200 people, next year 300. No, our purpose statement is we partner with the Inland Northwest to reach the poor with the love and power of the gospel so they might become God-dependent, contributing members of society.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We want to end homelessness. Yeah. And so, to me, put that money, put that compassion, volunteer, get involved. Our people come out of our program, and housing is huge. And then a mentor, getting them plugged into a church. Those are the things that produce long-term success. When you understand that statistically, a person who spends 5 years in active recovery, 85% are successful for life. Our program is like about 18 months. So we don't end it there. We get mentors. We get them plugged into a church. We want to see them get housing and get the support they need so they can be successful. You raised your kids. You had them in your house all those years, a solid foundation. Our people there's no foundation there. We've just had 18 months to begin that process.
Right.
So again, we're looking for Christians that will invite them in, maybe make someone a part of their family that hasn't had a family, and they begin to see what it's like for husband and wife to love each other, not yell at each other, see anger, and to spend time with a family and be part of a family. We were created for relationships, and it's in those relationships that people heal. So for your listeners, I would say, what is there I can do to engage in the life of someone that wants help? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And make a difference.
Mm-hmm. And the Union Gospel Mission is actively doing that. It's actively engaged in making the lives of people better. So if you wanted to volunteer in a program that was actually doing useful things for people that were struggling, the Union Gospel Mission is definitely a place that you can go and participate and feel good about participating in a very positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give our listeners a website?
Yeah, if they just go Google UGM Spokane, they'll get a Union Gospel Mission.
Yeah, we'll put
Spokane.
that link in the description and get you different ways to come in contact with it. And then also, if you have any questions and you'd like to work through the church to try and help out as well, we can get you in touch with them if you want to let us know here at the church as well. We can get everybody kind of connected together. So. But man, Phil, thank you for being with us, Chris. Man. I think we definitely want to have you on again because I think there's a whole other conversation to have philosophically about the idea of compassion and what compassion is. And so I think there's a lot more that we can add to this conversation. Mm-hmm. But man, thank you so much for being with us. This has been really eye-opening and really informative, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And we're looking forward to partnering with you here at the church. Right. We're always looking for different ways to partner with people that are doing good things in our church, and we're kind of really picky about who we take on. Yeah. And so
I've been hanging on to your donation letter.
Yeah.
Until after the interview.
Yeah. Greg has been he's always looking for the next great thing to invest in. So
can I say what the neatest part about this is I think you're the first gifts that we've had here face to face. They've always been online, remote, and so this has been a real blessing, real pleasure.
Is that actually true? No, we've had someone here before.
Who'd we have?
Don't look at me. I was the one that said that it's nice to have the first time.
No, we've had some.
somebody
Well, I mean, if you count Tim and the worship music.
He's
yeah.
in the family. That
Yeah.
doesn't count.
Our
No,
worship,
well,
we had a
come on.
worship leader in here.
Oh yeah, he was here,
He was here.
right?
All right.
Phil crossed state lines.
He did. Yeah, Phil went out of his way to be
Illegally,
here.
probably.
Yeah, for sure.
Couldn't have said these things in Washington.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
Do you have a men's ministry in Coeur d'Alene?
No,
No.
and we will not have one because it's too costly, and people can go from Coeur d'Alene to Spokane in 30 minutes. And
Okay.
so if a guy needs help here, he can come to Spokane
right.
and get the
Yeah.
help.
Makes sense.
And
That makes sense.
we are looking at expanding to the LC Valley.
Okay.
That's Lewiston and Clarkston.
Clarkston, yeah.
There's a need down that direction, but nothing.
Spokane is a good hub for
Yeah.
this whole entire
And
area. Yeah,
The women's ministry here is just because there's just so many more women
Yeah.
and children.
Yeah.
well, that is a
the
big
prison
deal.
system works more in Idaho with helping too.
Okay.
In Spokane, they don't send them from prison to your recovery center, but that isn't always a positive because people got to want change.
Yeah.
And it's easy to choose recovery over prison, but you get them in the recovery program and they weren't serious.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
But the need is obviously, it's just more women. And there's men too, but we're able to handle it right now.
Right.
We're not full,
Right. Right.
so
That's
there's
amazing.
plenty of room. We've got guys that have come up from Lewiston, Clarkson, to stay at our mission, and gals too. So again, it's when does it make sense financially?
Yeah.
Because it's very costly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, again, Phil, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate it. That about does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, a share with your friends, and subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes. Your support really helps us to get our message of biblical philosophy out to more people, and it also helps us to attract higher profile guests. So make sure you're doing all those things to help us out. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Gavin, for helping us to produce the episode. You don't see Gavin here, Phil, because he's our sound and mixing guy. But thank you also to ABC and all of its members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. Until next time, remember, be brave, be bold, be loud. You can be a force for biblical morality in your world. Don't wait. Don't be silent. Don't give up. And with that, we are out.